welcome everyone. Thank you all for joining us today for, I think this is our third HepNET, Hepatitis Network for Education and Testing, Leading with Lived Experience webinar. And today we have two amazing speakers, and we are going to be talking about bridging the divide, exploring friendship, allyship, and the complexities and nuance of Black and white women's relationships in harm reduction. So I'm Zakia Grubb, she, her pronoun. I work at NASDAQ on the hepatitis team, and I'll be moderating today. And I'm going to let our speakers introduce themselves, and then we can get into our discussion. So, and I'm really excited for the session today. I think it'll be a good opportunity for us to, I guess, get a little bit introspective about some of these complexities that we face in harm reduction work. And hopefully we all get a chance to, really think about how we show up in this work and how we can best serve folks. So I'm going to turn it over to our speakers for some introductions, and then we'll get started with our awesome conversation for today.
Hi, everyone. I'll go ahead and introduce myself. I'm Jennifer Sharp, and I've been working with Dziko at the HepNET project with NASDAQ for the last couple of years. And I am really grateful to have met her. We've become good friends over that time. And I also run a harm reduction program here in Tulsa, Oklahoma called SHOTS. And so, yeah, a lot of our relationship was built on skill sharing and just kind of navigating work stuff. But through that, we also have formed a really cool friendship. And yeah, I'm grateful, really grateful to be here today with Dziko.
Same, Jen. Hey, y'all. My name is Dziko Singleton. I use she, her pronouns. Like Jen spoke to, I'm one of the HepNET LLE Consultants, and I'm also a coordinator for a harm reduction program here in Richmond, Virginia. And yeah, Jen and I, this was the friendship that I didn't see coming. This was the work relationship I didn't see coming. So I've had a lot of other relationships like this that have taken various different paths. And so I was really interested in talking about this. And yeah, that's what we're doing today. We're not gonna solve world hunger or hate today. That's not our goal. I think that we really, really wanted to, as the title suggests, bridging the divide. Because doing this work in harm reduction and public health and a bunch of different spaces too can be super complex, super nuanced, and super harmful sometimes. And I think we just wanted to talk about that and talk about what our experiences have been.
Yeah, thank y'all so much. And also I would say, we would love to hear from folks in the audience about your experiences as well. So feel free to share. So I want to get us started with our first question. So can you all tell us a little bit about HepNET and the training you all completed to become HepNET Leading with Lived Experience Consultants? So this is where you all first met, first started working together. So how did that go?
Yeah, I can talk about it. I came into the cohort a little bit late, but the premise of it was, how best or the best practices for reaching a marginalized or purposely ignored group of folks, Black and brown folks who needed hepatitis treatment, prevention, education, and all the things. We know that this space has been rife with prejudice, misinformation, and, some really amazing people decided to put together a cohort with three of us, Dante as well. I don't know if Dante is here, but shout out to Dante. And it made up the three of us, Tina Reynolds and Nick Rhodes as well. It came with a lot of agreements, a lot of different modules, a lot of trainings. It really made me do a deep dive into some of the belief systems that I've held on to for a lot of years. It made me take a deeper look at some of the things I knew to be true and how we could still work within these sometimes really violent systems, right? So in the midst of that, there's been a lot of reverence and admiration for each other's work, for each other's perspective. And yeah, that's why we're here today. That's just my take on it.
Yeah, I agree. We were kind of tasked with, it is an interesting project. Like our first task was to, after our training, was to address jurisdictions and their plans for hepatitis elimination. And I think that I really didn't know how to do that. I thought, well, here I am, so I have to talk to a state about how to address this really complicated matter. And I think that that's kind of where like Dziko and I started relying on one another and finding out that it was like our experience was the thing that we brought to the table. And yeah, it's still going on. But yeah, I think HepNET is a really important project, and not only like, us working with other jurisdictions which feels really big, like it's opened up this space where we can have just conversations about how like dynamics that we see, things that we see play out. And yeah, it's just been personally a really interesting space for me. And yeah, the conversations that I've had with other people through HepNET has been transformative, to say the least.
Yeah, thanks though for that. So I know, Dziko, you mentioned y'all had community agreements. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about those and how you all use them to create an environment of trust and sharing while you all were going through the training and also while you all were leading the learning community.
I wish I could remember all of them verbatim, but the premise of the community agreements really centered on trust, respect, and reverence for the cultural sensitivity of the work, right? And there were times when some of my cultural beliefs were a little bit tested, and I spoke to it. There's no reason to have these performative type discussions when, we're trying to eliminate Hep C, right? We're trying to perform harm reduction. I didn't have time for that. So at any time when I felt that something didn't, and not saying that I'm the resident expert, but when I knew something wasn't quite right, we were able to talk about that. And space was held for all of that. Shout out to Tina Reynolds, because she was an absolute guiding force within the agreements. I just can't remember verbatim, but it absolutely got us to the points that we were able to lead the various jurisdictions, which included New Hampshire, which was mine, Idaho was Jen's, and Houston was Dante's. And they proved effective when we had to relay this information to different harm reduction programs and health departments. I want to say too, a little bit, like, I have a couple of disclaimers, I think, during the course of this conversation. Like, this is not a sensitivity training, the reason why I really wanted to talk about this and explore this is because it needed to be done. I've had a ton of different harmful interactions since I've been doing this work. It's not always cutesy and demure. So, this is not going to be that type of conversation where, oh, we are the world, we can make this work. I just really wanted to touch on the way HepNET really took these difficult conversations and allowed us to share our views and our experiences and make them one so that we could absolutely reach the people who they needed to reach. This work is messy, it's complicated, and a lot of times it can be culturally insensitive. And I just wanted to make sure that we spoke to that. So didn't mean to veer too much off the topics, Zakia, but that's a little bit of a precursor. I thought about that. I don't want anybody to be offended. If you feel like you might be offended, this might not be the webinar for you. This is something that happens to me in my everyday life, even outside of public health. And I wanted to talk about the relationship that Jen and I forged through all of these beautiful community agreements and the sometimes messy work we do. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Thanks.
I think with regard to community agreements, the things that really stuck with me, like throughout HepNet, and that I've also just kind of like tried to bring with me into other spaces are assuming good intentions. Like we obviously can't do that with everybody, but when we're trying to get work done and we're working in a group toward like in a direction, that assuming good intentions and establishing trust with one another. And it's like, just so you know, I'm like never trying to say anything harmful. And just getting that out of the way, that then we can, the next like community agreement that really impacted me was Say It Ugly. And that we had a conversation once where someone was trying to address a difficult topic, and they were like, I think it was like around something harmful, and they were like, I don't really know how to say this nicely. And someone in the group was like, why would you want to say that nicely? Like, it's not nice. And I think that those two things were really helpful to me, and helped us kind of like, it's like, okay, so we know that we don't want to cause harm, and we don't want to like waste time and tap dance around things that probably just need to be actually addressed. And that opened up the floor for these really important conversations, and just kind of stripped away some of the obstacles when people are trying to have like difficult conversations and we're sidestepping certain things. It's like, what if we could just talk about it? And I feel like that's kind of like the whole point of today's webinar, I think, is, underneath. Dziko and I have spent a lot of time together just like talking, and that's where, we have a lot of these conversations.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, you can't do this work without being uncomfortable, right? And like confronting, all the things that are put on us through society, and working through that is important. So I guess for next, I want to know a little bit more about how you all developed your relationship when you all went through the training. And how that has helped you all as a support system to confronting some of these things with racism and sexism within harm reduction. And yeah, just want to learn more.
I can touch on this one. When it was time for us to start doing our first interactions with the jurisdictions, we were like, what are we supposed to do? I think Jen texted me one night and was like, hey, can we talk about this together? And that's where it really, really started. I think because it was a pilot program, both of us were so brand new to this cohort, because it was a brand new cohort, right? We were just like, are we going to do this right? Is this how it's supposed to be done? And that text thread took on a life of its own. It opened up into phone conversations, private Zoom meetings, and then us traveling and presenting together. So I think it started with two women with very definitive ideas about how best to approach these topics, to make sure that our cohort was represented by the very best that we had to give. And at the same time, wanting to make sure that we were doing it right. And it started off with one thread, one text from Jen, and it just developed into this whole thing. When I got into this work, I struggled with some women in this work, white and Black. And then I thought about it. I was like, I present on the dangers of fentanyl and xylazine all the time. And one of the most harmful substances for me has been white women's tears. And I did not know how close I really wanted to work with someone else. And it's really vulnerable space, right? We're talking about people with lived experience and how best to reach people who look like me, right? Because the areas that I go into are historically and predominantly Black. How much do I want to talk about this in this cohort? And working with Jen has just shattered every harmful thing that I've been through. And in the past 6 months, in the past year, in the past 4 years, I've been doing this within this setting. So again, I think I kind of veered off the topic, but that's important, man, because when I got here, I inherited a lot of white savior type stuff when I got here. I'm not dissing anybody, no shade, but it's true. You know, I'm not going to sugarcoat my experience. Just really harmful. And so, yeah, I didn't know how much I was ready to be open and vulnerable and working in this space that I revere so much. And it's been the polar opposite of that with Jen. She's super in tune to Dziko. I just want to make sure that, you know, I'm doing this correctly. You know, this is how I plan on doing this. I appreciate her touching base with me about certain things because she is a white woman. And when she's talking about certain work that she does with people who don't look like her or identify with her, she's willing to talk about it and explore the best ways that she can do this as respectfully as she can. So this is why that was.
Yeah, I feel like Dziko and I established just kind of a skill sharing dynamic. I said that before, but I think like we were just having kind of doubts about what it was exactly we were supposed to be doing. I remember feeling like, well, I haven't made a presentation for this thing. Like, am I supposed to have like slides? I don't have anything. And yeah, just kind of like finding our way and like how to be effective in the roles that we had as LLEs, and just kind of like, I don't really know, you know, we were told that like our experience is why we were there and that's what we bring to the table, but it still felt like, I think the two of us both felt like, well, I don't have anything prepared, you know, and just kind of that's like where that, you know, we talk about like trust and trusting the people that you're with, but when you are kind of like relying on one another behind the scenes to kind of, you know, stay ruddered and stay engaged in a process, that's where you like develop, you know, we form relationships with one another. And I think like, yeah, Dziko and I just through the beginning of HepNET, we sort of established this little like, well, if I have any questions, I'll ask Dziko, and Dziko would check in with me the same way. And but yeah, eventually we found ourselves like on trips together and you know, so it was like we had this connection, but then that connection turned into something like, you know, became a friendship because we just keep finding ourselves together in places. So yeah, I just really appreciate that. The beginning was just us trying to get through something.
Yeah, thanks for that. I guess, yeah, sometimes being in unfamiliar situations and not knowing what's the best way to proceed is often like a place of finding, I don't know, I was gonna say comfort, but maybe that's not the right word. But finding I can't think of the right word, but finding, I guess, comfort or solace in someone else that has similar concerns, similar experiences, and similar, I guess, just wanting to connect and talk with someone about how you go through things. I guess for my next question is just seeing about and just hearing a little bit more about how your relationship has changed and how it has grown as you all have gone through this process. And then especially wanting to know how his relationship and how much you've learned and grown from each other has reinforced some of the ways that you all approach your harm reduction work, especially in regards to matters around race and gender.
I guess I can take that. It's just gone beyond HepNet into, like we've been speaking to, a really nice friendship, right? Jen is all the way out in Oklahoma. I'm here in Virginia, and we touch base on a lot of stuff within our respective harm reduction programs with each other, right? We check in, I know about Jen's family, she knows about mine, and we can kind of leave some of the harm reduction and public health and HepNet and Hep C stuff out of it and just check in with each other. And that's really important to me. It just is, there is no code switching. Like the code switching is exhausting. Somebody spoke about doing things in a corporate way. I think for a lot of us on this call, I can't see everybody, but if you are a Black or brown person, you understand what I mean. The code switching becomes exhausting. And I don't have to do that with Jen. I feel really free to speak openly and candidly. And that means a lot to me. There are some days you just don't feel like doing all of the performative stuff. I'm trying to refrain from cussing. Some of the performative stuff that goes on, in certain spaces. So it just leaves a lot of room just to be like, hey, how you doing? What you do Saturday? Sending happy birthday wishes to each other, it's just opened up into a nice friendship. And like I said at the beginning of this, this was not what I was looking for. Because of some interactions that I've had, really, really hurtful and harmful interactions, with people telling me how best to serve people who look like me in the areas that I've lived in. And it's some of those circumstances felt insulting. And I just don't have that relationship with Jen. We talk about everything. And I'm just really appreciative of the friendship that came out of the work relationship.
Yeah, I agree completely. I think it's really interesting because I don't know, while we're talking about this, I have these little like snapshots in my head. Like Dziko and I recently were on a trip for a conference, and we were just, making our way around Detroit and like trying different places and seeing different things. And like I just have this like we were having like this really good conversation. We went to go get treats, and we were just like sitting at a table on the street in the city, having like a conversation that I felt like was important and impactful. But it was also like it would have been maybe a conversation that was like difficult, or that I was like nervous having with someone I didn't know well, but because it's like I'm having this conversation with my friend, we can kind of like, I don't know, not to sound like corny or anything, but it's like everything we discuss is like sort of surrounded by this like love and respect for one another. So it's like when we get into these discussions, like we're really listening to one another and really like appreciating each other's perspective. And I don't know, I appreciate so much like the dynamic that we have. And that, yeah, when I started, I think I was like very, very nervous because like in HepNet, one of the things that we were supposed to center was like Black health equity was like very, very, like that was like the focus that I needed to like guide myself with, and kind of like not really knowing how to do that as a white person, and like to do it like authentically and not performatively, and to do it well, and like with care and intention. And I think I just felt like I was always like in our little HepNet behind the scenes meetings, I'd be like, guys, I just like, there's that like fear of like, I don't want to be cringe is something I was always saying. And, you know, but it's like some like just learning that sometimes things are cringe and that sometimes things are uncomfortable, and just like learning how to swallow those things and kind of like not in a you know, in a way that like causes us like, you know, we have all this like weight on us, but just in integrating it and processing things and like letting them change kind of the way you see things. And then having, I don't know, having a dynamic where it's like a friend, like this is my friend that I'm talking to, and I can honestly just like talk things out. And not, that's also not to say that I like have a friend that I can just like dump everything on. It's more like constructive than that. And I appreciate that both like professionally and like with regard to just making my life richer. And like we all need like a beautiful friendship garden.
Yeah, I appreciate that. We do need a friendship garden. That's amazing. I know, Zico, you had some references you wanted to share with folks, especially, I'll pull up on the screen. Where's the thing? Um, Especially as we're thinking about, um, there we go. As we're thinking about how we can do this work in harm reduction, and seeing how you know, we as staff, how we as folks providing services, and also folks receiving services, how racism, how sexism, how misogynoir affects folks in the work that they do. So Zico had some references she wanted to share with you all, to, I guess, do some additional reading and some learning about how these things affect folks. So I don't know if you want to have some comments about that.
Yeah, shout out to Moya Bailey. I talk about misogynoir so much. I did not know that there was a name for the phenomenon that I was experiencing doing the work. Misogynoir speaks to a lot of different pockets of my life, especially being one half of the coordinating team for this program. I get a lot of shade, a lot of shade. And so when I came across her works, and, you know, I was just like, oh my God, somebody was actually able to name these things that I go through the course of my decision making, through the course of my instruction, through the course of, because I'm the coordinator, because I said so, you know, in different rooms and different meetings. And so shout out to Moya Bailey. In this article by Dr. Keisha Thomas, really, really put stuff into perspective for me. The persistence of pet to threat. I have experienced that, you know. I always say when I first came to the agency that I work at, and this is no shade to them because I absolutely love where I work. I don't know if they quite knew what to do with me. You know, I came with 30 years of lived experience with addiction and carceral situations. And 27 felonies, right? I just don't know if they quite knew what to do with me, but I absolutely deserved this spot. And so the great thing about where I'm working is that I was given carte blanche to run this program along with my co-coordinator the way that we saw fit. And it's changed dynamically, right? But I also went through the pet to threat phenomenon because it was like I was being like noveltized, some tokenism happened. And, let me give you an example. For the sake of anonymity, we're going to call this person Becky. So a week into me working here, I'm trying to be super diplomatic. This person said to me, Dziko, I am so happy that you decided to take the offer. I'm so happy that you're working here. And I was like, me too. I was like, I feel really privileged to be here and share some stuff. And she was like, yeah, it's like we hired the Black Becky. And in that instance, in that moment, I think, and nothing really surprises me, I turned 51 yesterday. There's not a lot that surprises me or shocks me. That absolutely stunned me that this woman said this to me. And I can read you. I'm known to read, but in that instance, the only thing I could think of was like, I am not the Black Becky, I'm Black Dziko. And so that was the beginning of the pet to threat thing for me since I've been working here, right? It's happened a bunch of different times in different ways, really, really macro sometimes, really micro sometimes. But the fact that it happens nonetheless, is important, where you go from being up here and the Black friend and all this stuff until it's time for you to come and make firm decisions. And you said what you said, and then you become the threat. And it can be very nuanced, very subtle, the way that change happens, but it happens. And I don't think that I'm speaking to a unique experience. I feel like if you're a Black or brown person, that this happens. And so this by Keisha Thomas is has become like a guide for me in doing the work, because yeah, it happens.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing those resources. I don't know. It's always a good thing when like feelings that you have or you really get an idea that, I mean, they're universal. Well, not universal, but that other people feel them too. Especially the pet to threat thing. I mean, not, I don't want to minimize it, but the pet to threat idea, that is definitely something that a lot of folks experience, being a novel, new, interesting thing. But then when you start to show your experience and you start to show that you know what you're doing and that you're really supposed to be here, you're not just here as a token. Yeah, I think, yeah, that's definitely something that folks, I imagine a lot of folks have experienced. And then it's definitely compounded with other ways that your identity affects how folks react to you. I don't know, Jen, did you want to add any thoughts, especially about any of these ways that different intersecting identities can affect some of the harm reduction work that you do?
I mean, I think just like taking into account the experiences of others and like really leaning in and listening to people, and when they say something is a certain way, to like pay attention to that, and that, like it's like check out the resources. And I don't know, if you think that you're seeing, I don't know. So just since like starting this project, because like I had to kind of learn how to, like I said before, like not really knowing my place or how to like move forward and for it to, be impactful in any way. I have started kind of like looking at, like I've heard statistics, like, and I've heard people say things like really well intentioned, like assuming good intentions, seeing things and the way they're represented, and then hearing these like takes on those things and being like, well, I don't know if that's exactly right. Like, I think, maybe something is still being sidestepped here. And just to kind of like, I would just say, if you think you're seeing something that is like, like a harmful dynamic, kind of like dig a little deeper and examine it a little further. And, without, there's this like idea of like, white people can't just be like asking Black and brown people questions all the time about like dynamics, but it's just like listen and pay attention and like like, what are other people saying? And like I've definitely, like I said, when I was seeing that information presented, and then the like all of the information that was provided along with it, like there was a gal next to me that was just like, you know, so that was kind of like, we had a little side conversation later about it, but I'm being vague because it was like a whole thing, and it's also not new. But yeah, pick apart those dynamics and kind of like just pay attention. And if you think you see something, like you probably do, you know.
You're like, call that out. Like, a word that's overused so much, I think it's starting to become one of my something that plucks my nerves. Conversations. I am sick of that word. I understand we have to have conversations and talk, but after a while, like all these conversations and no action being taken to change a thing becomes super performative to me. It's what I call boutique shit. I'm sorry, that's my first curse word. I have time for boutique stuff. I just don't. We're losing too many people. Too many people are being held back from receiving excellent health care, just too many things. And I just get sick of it. I'm just interested in doing the work, making sure that the people who need the services receive them, and they aren't left out of these conversations. There's that word again. They're not left out of this. And it can become super hard. Another thing that plucks my nerves, I noticed that a lot of programs preach radical love. And then when Jen and I had a conversation about this, and then when I meet them or when it's time for me to interact with them, I feel that it's anything but. It feels super exclusionary and stuff. Harm reduction can be super cliquish. I've learned that. But at the premise of it, you keep talking about this radical love, and you're not willing to hear the insights of this Black woman who does this work, who's been on the other side of this work. So, yeah, it's just a trip. It's nothing new or novel. This separation of, this Black thing or this white thing. What's intriguing to me is the relationship that Jen and I have developed through this work, which can be hella exclusionary, super segregated, whether or not people want to admit it or not. It is. It just is. Every conference that I've gone to has been really cliquish in ways. Some of the groups are over here and they kind of being snobby. I'm like, well, harm reduction, like harm reduction, the absence of harm, so this is why I'm always so willing to have conversations with Jen. And this is why I really wanted to talk about this. Our relationship has far exceeded anything that I thought possible. I don't, like I said before, I wasn't looking for this. And just the fact that Jen and I consult each other about everything from buying fur coats to being on each other's boards of directors, just different stuff like that is fascinating to me. I have my own inherent bias, as all of us on these screens do. And with a lot of things, they quickly dissolved because I have been really, really hurt. I've been given the angry Black woman trope more times than I care to admit. And it's a role that I relish in. There's nothing wrong with being angry. I am angry. I'm angry about a lot of different things, especially when it comes to mental health, Hep C treatment, and substance use treatment among Black and brown people. So I don't have a lot of time for a lot of stupid conversations when I can actually do this work with somebody who cares about it as much as I do. And the fact that we can consult with each other from Oklahoma to Virginia means everything to me. It just means everything to me. And like I said, this is not a We Are the World type webinar, but it's worth talking about the beautiful friendship and relationship that has developed all because of this HepNET cohort, because I don't think it ever would have happened any other way.
Yeah. And when you said calling that out, Dziko, I thought of with that presentation, like I mentioned that in a group of people, and like my kind of like after I had thought about it, and I was surprised like people didn't necessarily agree with like they were kind of like still defending the statistics and the way they were like analyzed and presented to the group. And that's like another thing is if you see something, say something, maybe people don't agree with you. And it's like that is hard too. I think like, oh, did I get it wrong? And it's like, maybe not. Probably not. Just like it's not a lot of these conversations and dynamics that we talk about in this work are really uncomfortable, and they make people feel all kinds of different ways. And I think just like not abandoning things when you get it wrong and like staying with it and staying uncomfortable and just kind of committing to that is really important. And that's another thing I've gotten out of HepNet is just like commit to the fact that it's going to be uncomfortable and it's going to feel weird sometimes.
Yeah, I agree. I like the point about, yeah, we have to be uncomfortable. And I guess, I don't know, all movements, I guess, at some point gets cliquish. I think that's unfortunately a side effect of capitalism. And we have a scarcity mindset of there's only so much and we have to make sure that we get it. So I don't know, I think that affects movements a lot as well. I don't know. Just random thoughts. But I did want to ask you all about, because I know this can be I guess, a difficult and I said uncomfortable conversation that we often have about how to deal with some of these systems, specifically like sexism and racism. But I did want to end, and I know we're going to have some questions, so we may go backwards, but I did want to end a little bit and hear how you all prioritize self-care. I know we heard mention of fur coats, but yeah, how do you all prioritize self-care and in ensuring that you are taking care of yourselves when having to deal with, which can be such traumatizing and depressing and all the sad things with this work.
Go ahead, Jen.
I mean, so I think like so many of us in this work, we come with our own lived experience, living experience. We're all just, I don't know, going through it at any point in time. And then we come all loaded with all this like previous lived experience. I remind myself that it's just really important for me to keep myself intact. And I put a lot of like heart into nurturing myself and my relationship. Like my friendships have become really important to me. I mean, they always have been, but I think it's like I'm, in my 40s and just kind of you look at who's around you, all the like shiny people that you have in your life, and you just want to take care of them. So I put a lot of effort into just like preserving myself and my routine and making sure that I have, I can be decently happy and fulfilled. And that I have people that I love surrounding me and people to spend time with and think about and take up mental real estate in someone else's mind is like really a good experience. So yeah, that's kind of, I have to have fun. I have to have fun once a week, like, with friends. And just prioritizing fun and friendship.
I had a really close friend who works in the field. He works in collegiate recovery. I was doing my internship under him last year, and he said, "Well, Dziko, what are you doing about self-care?" And he said, "Now, don't tell me anything about massages and pedicures and da 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 da." And I said, well, what's your definition of self-care? He said, well, for me, you know, I go hiking, I go camping. I said, well, don't yuck my yum, you know. I make sure that I take care of me, whether it is a massage, or these are things that I enjoy. I make sure that when everything starts plucking my nerves and I become super irritated, or when I become desensitized to the deaths that we hear about, this is when I know that I need to check in with myself. And I will totally disconnect from stuff. I will disconnect my work phone. I will disconnect from my work email. And I just can't make myself readily available because I do have a thing where I feel like I can fix, manage, and control a bunch of different stuff. And for me, it's disconnect. Luckily and thankfully, my family had most of my immediate family has taken allyship training, peer training. I'm able to talk about my family very openly and freely, and my partner works in the field, so I have really good sounding boards. And I just have to disconnect. Like we keep saying, you know, this work can be heavy, it can be ugly, but it's absolutely necessary and gratifying because I did not have access to these services when I was still using. So I have to disconnect, and that's just the best way for me to do it, you know. So yeah, I will go get a pedicure. I will go get a $13 cup of coffee. And I know that's the capitalism speaking against IKEA, you know, but these are things that make me super happy some days, you know, when I have just had about enough, when my battery is just about to deplete itself. So I find ways to take care of me because I'm no good to anybody who relies on me for services, or anything that I'm able to provide, or even if it's just a hug. I'm no good if I don't do that. So sometimes I have to buy the bag and buy the coffee, and then I can resume to normal activities because otherwise I'm just a mess.
Yeah, thank y'all so much for that. I know sometimes we all need reminders that we got to take care of ourselves. So I appreciate y'all sharing how y'all do that for yourselves. And also I wanted to thank, because we're going to go to questions and discussion. But I wanted to thank our presenters so much so far for the discussion so far. And we do have a survey that I want to share so that way folks can get it if you have to hop off. Yeah, here's our survey, just to let us know what y'all would like to hear about more in the future and how we can do better. But I do want to open it up to any questions or discussions that folks may have. I know Colin had a question, but they had to leave. But I don't know if anyone, can y'all still see my screen? Yeah, I don't know why it went black. Okay. That was weird. But yeah, if anyone had any thoughts or questions that y'all wanted to share.
I just saw what Philip said in the chat and talking about disconnecting. I think that's really, really important for us, like as harm reductionists, because I just hear the chatter around like being places like we're there on off hours and like how important it is for us to be accessible. And it's like we can still like structure that. So it's like if I want to do a late night outreach on a Friday night or be somewhere like at odd hours, it's like then maybe I am not somewhere earlier in the day, or like, you know, still having plenty of time and space. Like we don't always have to be accessible and available. And it's really, really important. Like, you know, yeah, like it's like I'm no good for you if I don't feel good, you know. So I love that we are talking about that.
Yeah, thanks, Jen. Also, Philip, go ahead. If you can unmute yourself.
I don't have a question necessarily. I just wanted to add to my comment just now and piggyback off of it. I come from the world of doing drag. I do a lot of pageants. I've done like 43 pageants in the past 10 years. And on stage question, they often ask you, if you win the pageant tonight, what will you do the next day? And you often get this like cookie cutter answer of, I'm going to get to work. I'm going to work on my rate. I'm going to do this. And I've practiced to where I want to say that what I'm going to do tomorrow is go to sleep. I'm going to rest because the work will be there the next day. And I feel like so many of us, we tend to put so much hard work into programs and efforts and trying to win these pageants. And then the next day you're ready to go to work. I was like, well, you should be exhausted from the work that you put in to prepare that, or just putting on a huge event. Take that time to rest the next day because the work's going to be there the next day. And I think people forget that. So I just wanted to piggyback off of that. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Philip. I don't know if anyone else had any thoughts or reflections you all wanted to share. I did have that question from Colin. Let me find it, get asked. They're wondering, what is one thing that each of you all have learned from HepNet and y'all's relationship that you take out into the day-to-day work?
I think,
Go ahead, Jen.
oh,
I'm thinking
sorry.
No, go ahead.
I think the like being uncomfortable thing is the like thing that I learned from HepNet, that it's not, well, I say learned, it's in my mind. It's not, learning to be uncomfortable is kind of like it's uncomfortable because you can't really learn it, but just being open to that and open to the fact that things are going to be painful sometimes and difficult, and just kind of learning to stay with it and like trusting ourselves, like in those moments, to still move forward gently and with compassion, but also staying strong and resilient in ourselves, and just like trusting ourselves in the discomfort. That's the thing that, and I also try to like take that into just integrate it into my being, that things that are important are often uncomfortable and difficult. So yeah, just learning to stick around, like, and stay there with it.
I see Courtney's question says if we've ever had to defend our friendship or our work to either our colleagues, and how we handle that. I haven't. I wish I would have to defend my friendship or my work with who I choose to someone. Like I said, I turned 51 yesterday. It's just some stuff that I'm not going to do. I'm never going to defend who I choose to be friends with, who I choose to work closely with. And I'm not saying that Jen and my friendship is this novel, incredible idea. It's not. We're two women who approach this work with lived experience, who care deeply about the people that we serve and who we advocate for, while at the same time advocating for ourselves. We talk about everything: money, raising kids, travel, what we're eating for dinner in whatever city we're in. I enjoy this friendship because, like I said before, and Zakia spoke to, this work can be cliquish. Sometimes you could be at a conference with 3,500 people, and these really well-known organizations will be there, and you try to, you recognize people from the work they've done, and hey, I'm so happy to meet you, and and it's really cold shoulder. Like, I don't have to go through that. I'm still willing to be in these spaces, but I know that if Jen and I presenting together, my girl is here. We're going to find something decadent to eat, going to get a great dessert, and going shopping. I don't have to defend that to anybody, right? And so, Courtney, I hope that answers your question. Like I said, we're not this, this model of Black and white women doing the work. We're definitely not that. We both come with a lot of stuff. But luckily, we're able to talk about this stuff, and that just makes it work.
I agree with Dziko. I haven't had to defend any of it, but yeah, if I did, I would have some words. But yeah, I mainly am just grateful to have a friend who kind of like, I don't know, we experience similar stuff, like having similar, like working for organizations that are trying to help. Like we see so much unmet need, and like that's frustrating, and knowing how to like serve people better, and then also taking care of ourselves. It's just, you know, like, yeah, we're just people. We're just a couple of gals.
So we have a question from Philip. Is there a balance or a drastic difference, or are there actually more similarities in the communities you've worked with among different jurisdictions?
My jurisdiction was New Hampshire with a 10% population of Black people. I did not know how that was going to go, and I think it went really well for me, because there were a few brown people in my jurisdiction who absolutely advocated for them in New Hampshire, and they were willing to receive instruction and hear what I was saying. And so that's how my experience was. I think Jen might have something to say about her work.
Yeah, it was really interesting. And like, honestly, like I found myself really feeling for the person that like we like communicated with the most through this, like from my jurisdiction, because I thought, gosh, this is a really hard job, because we were really putting the screws to them, trying to like get them to make, you know, it's like a hepatitis C elimination program. You know, we need to be in lockstep with like SSPs, and like all of that makes perfect sense, right? Well, it wasn't that easy to get, you know, like I said, like no offense to Idaho, but it was just, it was more difficult than I thought, and it was less like 1 + 2 = 3. It seemed to all add up for me, but not necessarily that simple to get accomplished. And also just like kind of witnessing like seeing how resistant people with how resistant people are to like working with different groups of people, because it's, I assume, difficult and uncomfortable to call people in. I don't really know. I can't speak to like why they were so resistant and not centering the people that we were like sent to like ensure that like Black and brown people were centered in these efforts. Like witnessing the, I feel like I'm like losing my words, but like honestly witnessing that resistance and hearing like, well, there just isn't like a very large, you know, Black population in Idaho. And it's like finding that the response to that is that's exactly why like Black people need to be centered in this effort. So I don't know if that like really answers Philip's question, but yeah, it was kind of, I think like, you know, I live in Oklahoma. And of course, like I don't know, I grew up around racism. I guess we all kind of do in our respective like places, but I'm speaking as a white person. But yeah, it was just, it kind of felt like, am I looking at like I assume I got Idaho because they're kind of similar, and just, it's like when you're in something, you can't really see it for what it is, but when you see it playing out like across the field, it's like, oh, whoa, like that was really wild how they just like didn't acknowledge this really, really glaring gap, you know? So I hope what I just said made sense and came across, but yeah, it was interesting for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely a gap you have to acknowledge. Maybe a small amount of people, but where are all your adverse outcomes, you know? So yeah, thank you all so much for such a great conversation today. I know we can keep going, but I know folks have work and stuff to do. But yeah, I want to thank you all for the conversation. Thanks everyone from the audience for sharing and for questions. And yeah, please fill out the survey. Let us know what y'all want to hear about next. And we will have more webinars coming up. So thank y'all. Enjoy. Have a happy Wednesday. Oh, and happy birthday, Dziko. If I could sing, I would sing you happy birthday, but I don't think anybody wants to hear that. So we're going to skip that. But thank you and happy birthday.
Thanks so much, y'all. I appreciate it. Thanks for creating the space for Jen and myself. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. I'm really grateful for today.
Thanks, y'all. Y'all have a beautiful week.